Hi, I'm going to talk about a new poet I found recently. His name is David Schubert, and I found him in this anthology of American poetry here. This is the volume 2 of the 20th Century American Poetry, the Library of America series, and it's very good. He's in the second half because he was born in 1913. He died in 1946. And I think the reason why he's in here is because John Ashbery is one of the editors, if I remember correctly, and um, this guy was one of John Ashbery's favorite poets. There's John Ashbery actually wrote an essay about this guy in his collection Other Tradition, where he says that he prefers this guy over Eliot and Pound, and I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure if he held that opinion his whole life, but it's interesting that he would say that. And then he also goes on to say he's glad to have um, someone with the authority of William Carlos Williams to back him up, because William Carlos Williams said about David Schubert that he was like opening a window to a stuffy room that you didn't know um, was closed. Uh, and I'm not really sure about all that, but it would be nice if someone republished this guy's works, like a collected poems or something, and used those quotes on the back. I'm sure it'd sell a couple copies. But yeah, I pretty much just read through this anthology and was trying to find good poets, and unfortunately didn't find many. But this guy is one of them. And just what struck me about his poetry, none of his poems are boring. Like in the way that none of them are alike. Every one of his poems that's in this anthology is its own thing, and you can't predict what he's going to talk about in any of the poems, and that's always nice. But apart from that, he uses language really well, and I'll read a couple poems later in the video so you can get a good idea of it. But I think I'll go just a little bit about his biography, and then I'll get to the poems. So, um, yeah, like I said, he was born in 1913, lived in the Northeast in America, and he was very intelligent because when he was 16, he got accepted to Amherst in Massachusetts, which incidentally is the same school David Foster Wallace went to. And whenever David Schubert was going there, Robert Frost was actually one of the teachers. But he actually got kicked out of the school later for behavior, and he did have problems with psychological disturbances. He had said in his Wikipedia page that he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. But you can tell he was an extremely intelligent guy, and throughout his poems, he includes references to, like, for example, Kafka, Don Quixote. He includes references to classical music, like Handel, Bach. He includes references to painters like Bruegel and just various things like that. So that's always nice. Um, but he had a progressively harder life as he got older. Uh, he had tuberculosis and struggled with that. He did get married, and it's said that he tried to destroy all of his poems, and his wife was able to save some of them, and eventually he died in 1946, and eventually in 1961, after he had been dead for 15 years, she was able to get a collection of his poems published called Initial A, which is what I have here. It's from the library. I was able to get it, which is very nice. I didn't even look to see who published this. Oh, Macmillan. Macmillan published it. It's interesting. And then I think in 1983, I believe it was, there was another collection of his poems put out called Works and Days by some quarterly poem thing, but it's very expensive. I'm not even sure if you can find either of his books online. Well, I know there's one available, but it's like $50, and yeah, I was just lucky that my library had it. But if you weren't interested in checking out some of his stuff, there's like 6 of his poems in this here, and you can find this usually pretty cheap because there's a lot out there. And also it includes E. Cummings and a whole bunch of other good poets. So yeah, I think I'll just go ahead and read a couple of his poems and talk about them a little bit. I don't want this video to be too long, but the first one I'll read is called Peter and Mother, which is actually where the title of this book comes from. So, Peter and Mother. A hand is writing these lines on your eyes for journeys you'll never start for. They're transparencies. Wear rubbers and you will be wise. In dreams, initial A, and in the parlor the chandelier was bright with small toy tears. At evening the door opened on Clematis, and his mother with a shawl ran down the years to meet someone with an empty lunchbox. As they returned across the lot, he listened. In her head was truth, Hansel and Gretel, and a bar of sweetest song. Where the word is shadow of the deed, and hard upon it like first crocuses in snow, grow up and be my tenement house, my brick building. This paper representation imperfectly made, be like words at a railway station still speaking though the train has gone. The pity strong enough to tear the 4 walls down, scatter the children, the picture of the cow on the wall, grazing a different pasture. Talking her trite ghost, the smell of lilac is fainter and fainter. Thinking her worn face is like a whiteness on the brush of some eternal painter. And always growing farther, trying to hear something that was never expressed very clearly. Her journey ended that was hidden in the blindness of his naive skin. So as you can see from here, he just has, he really understands that the free verse aspect where you don't rely heavily on like preformed rhythm and rhyme, but you kind of vary it and emphasize it when you like. Let's see here. The next one I want to read is pretty good, and then after that there'll be a funny one. So this one's called The Transformation. The caterpillar, convoluted on the sunflower, like a cat purring before an 18th century fireplace, classically retrospective, is neither violent nor enigmatic. He is a Brooklyn Dodger, popularly reckoned as the Leafs nibbler, in reality the butterfly's storehouse, as the cat is Watt's inspiration, his steam engine. Curled so on my own leaf, I have, like Augustine, proceeded through suffering to suffering, because I suffered and suffered over that, hunting not the current movie but the star, more radiant than Greer Garson, while my kin I mourn their departure. Thus I died, as she did, for is death not only vacuity, a luna in the breathing habits? And what good is it to be a moon, when what is wanted is the pulsing radiance of homecoming and laughter? Now that, like myself, I walk the firm earth, I think of those whom living see I not. Separation of errands, leading onward, my sister who accompanied me on good times on the grass, walks through Belle Isle, swimming, whom I trailed while a tot like a Siamese twin, with what insidious pursuit trying to catch up with her wisdom. What about her? She too suffered the lapses of remembering which is grief's nostalgia, recrimination for no wrong done, unless ignorance is youth as evil doing. She saw New York's definition as brute power, while I still bewailed my lack of support, of sympathy. She watched her friends taking on the aspect of building materials, iron, cement, concrete. What of her friendlessness? Who took care of her? I, being her ambitious genius, scoffed the insouciant blackheads, whiteheads of her concern more than she disliked her own face. How tired I am of myself, how tired she was of herself. If either had been much older or much younger, in hotel lobbies, after every particle of energy spent typing figures, gazing at the rich, at Coney Island, making believe a beach where there were real waves full of water, not the little litter of junk and filth which the shingles retains till doomsday, finding in cheap amusements her support. How cheap the svelte in the Persian room with their décolleté intrigues bare-breasted. And I ride with her now in the subway, wanting somehow to do something for my omission. It is to my eternal discredit that just as years gone by, I cannot communicate with her, can't think of a single thing to tell her. I wish her well. The therapy is taking for granted the ugly scene, the actual tile subway station, and the frustration which time can it undo? And this next one here is called Getting a Mosquito. When I most savagely attack him in my conversation, he is not there. Afterwards I see his abundance, rebuking my partiality. I am red with anger, bloodshot. This mosquito's tintinnabulation, vociferous gongs molests me just a trifle. My wife investigates each cranny of the wall for the malicious enemy. Through his conversation I met his mother. She is still sitting far away in the Jersey hills on the Sunday, her hands pressed together, sweaty palms, gazing into vacancy. He said, "When I saw her looking like that, I never again resolved to budge 1 inch in kindness. It's a fight for existence, Darwin or no. My wife, sweet angel, has located the mosquito. How triumphantly she bangs out its death with the New York Times." Oh man. And kind of going along with that, I got the sense when I was reading this that Frank O'Hara took a lot of inspiration from this guy. I can only imagine he did, because, it's obvious that either Frank O'Hara found him and told John Ashbery about him, or the other way around. It had to have happened at some point. And I know Frank O'Hara in general was the more, he was known for finding good poets that other people didn't know about at the time. So if I had to guess, Frank O'Hara really liked David Schubert also, but I can't say for a fact. And then this last one I'm going to read here is probably my favorite. It's called A Corsage. Feeling like a very village of sorrow, just like Franz Schubert, with each sad bourgeois dolorously doleful, I only said when you asked me for my life story, well, the world is a funny place. Unpleasant things can happen. I chewed the silence, cryptic and stupidly. I felt diminished by myself, much like the passport photographs that make you look like an escaped convict or the victim of circumstances. I am the oyster shell after the succulent sea worm's been devoured, with only the pretense of sea in your cupped ear. The next day you wore a corsage of pansies, exultantly alive, serious scholars of melancholy, brave and lion-hearted with thoughtful thoughts. Now in this wall of eyes before me, icy eyes, now in the Broadway 7th Avenue Van Cortlandt subway, feeling quite walled in. Henry David Thoreau breaks the ice, says, "Time is the stream I go a-fishing in. What about you?" I, Henry, will study these pansies, profoundest professors of the world's woes. And, if you like those poems, there's more where that came from. You can even find quite a lot online. If you have access to JSTOR, there's a couple on there. And then also, just if you search online for David Schubert poet, you'll find some websites saying how he's unknown and things. I haven't gotten a hold of that essay by John Ashbery. I just saw an excerpt from it, but Yeah, this guy's an excellent poet. He's one of my favorite ones I found. I've been trying really hard recently to find good like mid-century American writers because since I found the Recognitions, I've loved that book so much, and it just gives me such a good feeling for the mid-century America. You know, taking all that you can from what the Recognition says about it, but just the fact that the Recognitions came out in that time, it does give me some hope that I can find something good. And um, yeah, so I'd recommend David Schubert if you like good poems. Um, yeah, so hope you enjoyed Death is a Gang Boss.